All right, today we're diving into something it seems like a total contradiction. It's this fascinating paradox right at the heart of Japanese parenting. How does a childhood that's built on intense emotional dependence end up creating some of the most independent and self-reliant kids you'll ever see? I mean, how does that even work? Let's break it down.
If you've ever been to Japan, you've probably seen this for yourself. Little kids, I'm talking 6, maybe 7 years old, just confidently walking to school all by themselves. You'll see them cleaning their own classrooms, navigating these incredibly complex subway systems like they've been doing it their whole lives, and lining up with this quiet discipline that is just, wow, it's truly remarkable. So that's the end result we see, right? This amazing self-reliance. But how they get there? Well, that's the real story.
And yeah, that brings us right back to the core puzzle. How on earth does this striking, super visible independence grow out of a childhood that is, for the first few years, defined by this incredible, intense dependence on their mom? It doesn't seem to add up, right? It feels like a total paradox. So let's unpack this thing piece by piece.
Okay, so the very first piece of this puzzle, and I mean this is the absolute foundation of the whole approach, is a concept that, well, it doesn't really have a simple English translation. The word is Amae.
So what is Amae? It's this passive desire to be loved, to be totally indulged, to just lean on someone completely. And this is the most important part. In Japanese culture, this need in a little kid is seen as 100% normal and acceptable. It's not a weakness. It's not bad behavior that you need to stamp out. It's just an expected, natural part of being a child.
So let's be really clear about what this is not. Amae is not about spoiling a child, at least not in the way we might think of it. It's not a character flaw, and it's definitely not supposed to be a permanent thing. What it is creating this deep emotional safety zone. It's this total acceptance of a child's need for love, and that becomes the foundation, the bedrock, for their bravery later on.
And yeah, this is absolutely the long-term strategy here. The whole point of building this emotional safety zone is so that down the road, the child actually dares to move away from their mother because they feel so completely secure and solid inside. You can think of it like a strategic investment in their future confidence.
Okay, so how does this all play out in the real world? Well, Japanese child rearing, which is called ikuji, basically unfolds in 3 really distinct stages. Okay, stage 1. From birth to about age 5 is what they call the child as emperor. During this time, pretty much all of the child's emotional needs are met and met generously. This is peak Amae. It's all about building that secure attachment, teaching the child deep down that someone is always here for me. But then, around age 6, when school starts, everything flips on its head. The child enters the servant phase, and now the focus shifts, like dramatically, to social rules, responsibility, and self-discipline. Then finally, from 16 on, they become an equal, and the relationship is much more adult to adult. But that transition, man, from emperor to servant, that's the real shock to the system, and it is the key to this whole thing.
So here's the core strategy, right? The entire plan hinges on using that first, intense phase of dependence, that emperor phase, to basically build up the emotional fuel tank. That's the strength they're going to need to handle the really disciplined, tough training of the servant phase. The first phase makes the second phase possible.
But what's all this discipline for anyway? It's not just about creating a quiet, obedient kid. Nope. The ultimate goal, the real prize, is to instill these specific, community-focused values that are just so deeply important in Japanese culture.
The first of these big values is sunayo. Now, this is not blind obedience, not at all. It's more about having a willing, open-hearted receptivity to guidance. A child who is sunayo doesn't just follow the rules because they have to. They get why the rules are there, and they cooperate willingly because they actually see the value in it. And the second big value, and you could argue this is the most important one, is omoyari. Think of it as empathy that leads directly to action. It's not just about feeling for someone. Omoyari means you're actually expected to anticipate what people need and then proactively do something to help. It really is empathy in motion.
And listen, this isn't just some nice idea. It's the main event. When you actually look at surveys of Japanese parents and what they want for their kids, an overwhelming majority say their top priority is developing omoyari, that consideration for others. It ranks way, way above things like individual achievement or prominence. This is what the whole system is engineered to create.
Okay, so let's bring it all home. It's time to finally solve that paradox we started with. how does all of this intense dependence somehow lead to incredible independence?
Here's the big connection. That deep emotional safety zone that gets built during those early years of Amae, that's what gives a child the inner strength, the resilience to handle the super high social expectations and the tough discipline that comes later. Think about it. Without that secure foundation, the demands of that servant phase would be absolutely crushing, but with it, they're just manageable challenges.
So, the crucial point, the big takeaway, is that it was never really a paradox to begin with. It's a process. In this way of thinking, dependence isn't the opposite of independence, it's the launchpad for it. That intense phase of being allowed to depend completely is the very thing that builds the inner strength they need for a lifetime of self-reliance and being considerate of others.
And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? In a culture that so often pushes for independence from day one, what if the real path to raising a truly strong, self-reliant, and considerate person doesn't start with pushing them away, but with first allowing them to depend on us completely? You know, when we think about the word discipline, phrases like no means no probably pop into your head, right? But what if there was a totally different way to think about it? An approach that's less about stopping bad behavior and more about, well, building good people.
So on one side, you have that familiar, direct approach, setting firm boundaries. But on the other, you have this three-part philosophy: to watch, to shape, and to think back. It's a huge shift from just saying stop that to actively building character from the inside out. So let's break down each of these ideas, starting with the very foundation of it all, the art of watching.
The first big idea here is a concept called Mimamoru, and at its heart, it's really the art of watching over. But it's more than that. It's a practice of profound trust, and it's the bedrock for this entire approach to raising capable, resilient kids. The word Mimamoru itself is so cool because it tells a story. It's made of two parts. You have mi, which means to look or observe, and then you have mamoru, which means to protect. So you see, this is not just passively watching from the sidelines. It is an active, engaged protecting by observing.
And that's the whole idea right there. The adult's job is to be a guardian, a safety net, but not a micromanager. It's all about creating a space where a child feels safe enough to try things, maybe even to fail, and to figure things out on their own. It is, in its own way, a radical act of trust.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, picture a preschool where two kids are squabbling over a toy. Instead of rushing in to solve it, the teacher deliberately stands back. They only step in if it looks like someone's about to get physically hurt. And sometimes, get this, if they think the kids can handle it, they might actually turn and walk away, signaling their absolute total confidence in the children's ability to figure it out.
Can you imagine the message that sends to a kid? It's unbelievably powerful. It's not, you're helpless and you need me to fix this. It's, I trust you. You are a capable person and you can handle this. This is how you build a real, deep sense of confidence and problem-solving skills, right from the very beginning.
Okay, so if Mimamoru is all about trusting them to find their own way, how do you give them the map? I mean, you can't just let them run wild, right? Well, that brings us to our next big idea, Shitsuke, which is all about how that guidance is actually provided.
Now, Shitsuke often gets translated as discipline, but honestly, that word doesn't even come close to capturing what it means. The actual characters used to write it suggest something so much more holistic, like a beautiful shaping of the entire person, bringing together their body, their mind, and their sense of self.
To really get what Shitsuke is all about, Japanese educators use this absolutely brilliant metaphor, basting stitches in sewing. If you've ever sewn anything, you know these stitches aren't meant to be permanent. They're just temporary guides. The process is really simple, but also pretty profound. First, you add these loose, temporary stitches to hold the fabric together and give it some structure. With that little bit of help, the garment starts to take its proper shape. And this is the whole point, once the final, strong seams are in place, you take out those temporary stitches. Their job is done.
And that is exactly the goal of Shitsuke. The rules, the guidance, those are just the temporary stitches. They're there to help the child internalize a moral structure, to build their own inner compass. The end game isn't lifelong obedience to outside rules. It's developing such strong internal character that those outside controls just aren't needed anymore.
But life happens, right? Kids make mistakes. Rules get broken. So what happens then? Well, this brings us to our third and final piece of the puzzle, Hansei, which is the art of reflection.
Instead of giving out a punishment, a Japanese parent or teacher is much more likely to say this, Hansei shinasai. It's a gentle request, not an angry demand. It means, please reflect on what you did. And that simple little phrase completely shifts the focus from an external consequence to internal learning.
Now, this is so important to understand. Hansei is not about making a kid sit and feel guilty or ashamed. Shame just paralyzes us. Hansei is the opposite. It's an active, forward-looking process that's designed to create growth.
This active process has 3 really clear steps. First, you have to look honestly at what went wrong. Second, you let yourself feel a healthy amount of discomfort or regret, not shame, but just a genuine feeling of, man, I wish I'd done that differently. And third, the most important step, you make a real concrete plan for how you're going to handle that situation better in the future.
And get this isn't just some parenting concept. It is a massive cornerstone of Japanese culture, and it's famously used in the business world. The whole philosophy of Kaizen, or continuous improvement, at Toyota is built on this very idea. Without that honest reflection, you just can't get better. It's impossible.
So when you look at the 2 paths, the difference is night and day, isn't it? The punishment model just ends. A rule is broken, a punishment is given, and that's it. The cycle's closed. But the reflection-based model transforms a mistake. A broken rule isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of a process that leads directly to personal development.
So now, let's put all the pieces of this puzzle together. Because these 3 concepts, Mimamoru, Shitsuke, and Hansei, they aren't just a list of separate ideas. They all work together, feeding into each other in this incredibly powerful, reinforcing cycle of growth.
Everything kicks off right here with Mimamoru. It starts with the adult's deep-seated trust in the child's ability to figure things out. That trust creates the psychological safety that's needed for everything else to even happen.
And because that child feels trusted, they're much more open to Shitsuke, to that temporary guidance. They don't see the rules as just some arbitrary punishment. They see them as helpful stitches that let them build their own internal structure, their own character.
Then, that growing internal structure gives them the strength and the security they need to actually practice Hansei. A kid who feels capable and supported has the courage to look at their own mistakes honestly, without being totally overwhelmed by shame. And finally, of course, that genuine reflection creates real, lasting growth. It's not just about not making the same mistake again, it's about becoming a more thoughtful, more resilient, and more self-aware human being. And then the cycle starts all over again, with an even more capable child who has earned even more trust.
So it really leaves us with a powerful question to think about. In our own lives, whether that's with our kids, in our work teams, or even just with ourselves, how can we shift our focus away from just correcting actions and more toward building character? How can we teach not just what to do, but who to become?
Here's the game plan. We'll start by looking beyond just grades. Then, we're going to dive into 4 really key cultural concepts. First, the after-school world of Juku, then the powerful mindset of Gambatte, the social training ground of Bukatsu, and finally, the surprising lessons found in Shokuiku, or food education. And then we'll wrap it all up with the final lesson. To really truly grasp Japanese education, you have to understand that some of the most important lessons, they happen outside the formal curriculum. It's all about instilling a very specific set of cultural values that go way beyond academics. Okay, let's start with maybe the most visible and maybe the most misunderstood part of this whole system. Juku, what you could call the effort machine. So what in the world is Juku? Well, to put it simply, these are private cram schools or tutoring centers that students go to after their regular school day is already over. And the scale here is just massive. I mean, look at this. About 75%, that's 3 out of 4 junior high and high school students, are attending Juku. Families are spending billions and billions of dollars on this every single year.
Now, from the outside, this can look like nothing but just crazy, intense academic pressure, but the insider view, it's a bit more nuanced. Juku is also seen as a training ground for perseverance, for time management, and for learning how to just work really, really hard in a super structured environment.
This relentless focus on hard work, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's powered by a core cultural idea. You could almost call it the soul of effort that runs through all of Japanese society.
And that concept is Gambatte. Now, you might see this translated as do your best or good luck, but honestly, that translation barely even scratches the surface of what this word really means.
The message underneath Gambatte is so powerful. This quote just captures it perfectly. If you haven't succeeded yet, the message is you haven't tried hard enough. The core belief is that effort is the main, almost the only path to success. So the key takeaway here is that the moral value is placed on the effort itself, not just on whether you win or lose. A lot of researchers have pointed to this as a model for building what we now call grit. It creates this cultural belief that your personal effort is your own responsibility, which is a really fascinating contrast to other Japanese ideas about depending on the group. Okay, let's move on to Bukatsu and see how this all connects. If Gambatte is the personal mindset, then Bukatsu is where that mindset gets put into action in a really demanding social setting.
Bukatsu are school clubs, but believe me, these are a world away from a casual once-a-week hobby. They cover everything you can imagine, from baseball to calligraphy, and they demand this intense, almost daily commitment. We're talking practices before and after school.
And get this, participation is nearly universal. Over 90% of middle and high school students are part of a Bukatsu. It is a fundamental, totally non-negotiable part of being a teenager in Japan. The lessons they learn here are deeply social. Bukatsu is where you learn respect for your elders through the strict senpai-kohai, or senior-junior hierarchy. You learn teamwork, leadership, and maybe most importantly, you learn how to endure personal discomfort for the good of the team. And this phrase just illustrates it so brilliantly. Bukatsu acts as a compressed simulation of adult society. It's where a child learns they're no longer the center of their own universe. Instead, they are a single node in this complex web of obligations and what everyone owes to each other. For our final pillar, we're moving from the sports field to somewhere you might not expect, the lunchroom. This is where those same values of discipline and community are reinforced in a daily ritual. This is called Shokuiku, or food education, and it's considered so important that it was actually established by a national law back in 2005. It's a formal part of the curriculum that blends lessons on nutrition with ideas of gratitude and civic duty. The process itself is the lesson. The students, they transform their own classroom into a lunchroom. They put on little aprons and hats, and they serve the food to their classmates. And then after eating together, they are responsible for the entire cleanup. I mean, everything, right down to washing and folding milk cartons for recycling. And the philosophy here runs deep. Beyond the lessons in balanced nutrition, the core message is one of direct responsibility. If you make a mess, you clean it up. It's that simple. And the deeper lesson is that food isn't just fuel, it's a connection to your community, to the environment, and it's a reason to be grateful. Okay, so let's pull all of these different threads together and see what the final picture looks like. What is absolutely essential to understand is that Juku, Gambatte, Bukatsu, and Shokuiku, they're not separate things. They're all interlocking parts of a single integrated system. And together, they are designed to teach and constantly reinforce these core values of persistent effort, personal discipline, and a deep, deep sense of community interdependence. And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating and, frankly, complex question to think about. This system is incredibly effective at building grit and social cohesion, but it also makes us ask, where is the line between fostering healthy perseverance and creating harmful, relentless pressure? It's definitely a question worth thinking about. Okay, let's just jump right in with a question that basically broke the internet when people outside of Japan saw it. Could a 3-year-old, think about that, a 3-year-old go to the store all by themselves? This was the whole idea behind that hit show Old Enough, and for most of us, the answer is a big, flashing no way. But here's the thing, in Japan, this isn't just some crazy stunt for TV. It's a real cultural rite of passage. It's called Hajimete no Otsukai, which translates to my first errand. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a structured, real-life lesson in responsibility that a lot of Japanese kids actually experience. It's their first really big step out into the world, completely on their own. But see, this one little task, it teaches so much more than just how to buy some groceries. It's all about showing a child that, hey, they can remember what mom told them to do, they can find their way around their own neighborhood, and they can figure out little problems on their own. It's this incredibly powerful, real-world lesson in courage and self-reliance. Now you're probably thinking, how is this even possible? Well, it doesn't just happen in a bubble.
there's this whole social infrastructure that makes it work. Japanese cities are often built for walking. Violent crime rates are incredibly low. But the really crucial piece, the secret sauce, is the community mindset. This shared belief that all the adults are responsible for all the children. It's as much about trust as it is about safety.
And this sense of shared responsibility, it doesn't stop at the crosswalk. It goes right into the classroom. Let's look at another one of these amazing Japanese practices. It's called osoji, and it takes this idea of community care to a very, very hands-on level.
Okay, so picture this. Several times a week, right after lunch, students grab brooms, cloths, and buckets, and they get to work. They're sweeping their own classrooms, wiping down the hallways, and yep, even cleaning the toilets. Now here's the most important part. This is not a punishment. It's not detention, it's just part of the school day, as normal as math class.
And the philosophy behind osoji is pretty profound. It basically teaches that if you use a space, you are responsible for keeping it clean. It drills in this deep understanding that public spaces, like your school, are owned by everyone together, so they have to be maintained by everyone together. It's a direct lesson in being a good citizen, and you can really see the results. All right, so we've seen independence and community responsibility, but now we get to the real heart of the paradox, this parallel teaching of what seems like extreme toughness on one hand and extreme tenderness on the other.
So first, let's talk about toughness. There's this concept called gammon. It's a highly praised virtue, and it's all about being able to endure hardship with patience and, without complaining. When a parent tells their kid, gammon shinasai, or endure it, they're not being dismissive. They're actually sending a message. This feeling is temporary. You can get through this. You are strong enough to handle this.
Now, at the very same time that they're learning that lesson in toughness, there's this incredible tenderness. Co-sleeping is super common. The typical way it's done is called kawa no ji. The child sleeps right in the middle, kind of like the central stroke in the Japanese character for river, which is kawa. Just imagine, being nestled securely right between your parents.
So, do you see the puzzle here? On one side, you've got gammon, be tough, suck it up. And on the other, you have this constant physical closeness and incredible security. So how on earth can one parenting style champion two things that seem like total opposites? It feels like a contradiction, but there's a really powerful logic at play here.
And this brings us to the big aha moment. We can call it the independence paradox. This is where we see how these two forces that seem to be fighting each other don't just coexist, they actually need each other to work.
Okay, so here's the key. That intense closeness from things like co-sleeping builds this deep, unshakable sense of security. It literally makes a child's nervous system feel fundamentally safe. And once that inner foundation of safety is totally solid, it becomes so much easier for that child to take on challenges, to put up with discomfort, to practice gammon.
So this really brings us to the core idea. Far from being opposites, deep emotional dependence in early childhood is actually seen as the thing you need first to get to true independence and resilience later on. You build the strength to stand on your own by first feeling completely and totally supported.
So what's the end game of all this? What's the ultimate goal? Well, it's not about raising these lonely warriors who can just endure anything. It's about cultivating what you could call a small citizen. Someone who is strong, yes, but also deeply considerate of the group.
All these different practices are like building blocks. We've talked about the community care of osoji and the endurance of gammon, but it all starts with amae, that deep feeling of attachment and dependence. And when you put those together with concepts like shokuiku, which is food education, and omoyoyari, the ability to really empathize with others, you get a person who understands that they're part of something bigger.
In the end, this approach avoids two big extremes. You're not putting the child on a pedestal and making them the center of the universe, but you're also not just throwing them out into the cold, hard world. Instead, you treat them like a real, contributing member of the community right from day one. They're held close enough to feel strong, but given enough responsibility to understand their place among other people. I think this line just perfectly sums up the whole model. That deep well of dependence isn't a weakness, it's the fuel that gets you started on the journey. But the journey itself means you eventually have to walk on your own 2 feet, and, this is the crucial part, to be aware of and considerate towards everybody else who's walking that path with you.
So we're left with this really fascinating question to chew on, right? By focusing so much on early independence, are we sometimes skipping over the step that builds a deeper, more resilient kind of inner security? It's a powerful idea to think about, that maybe, just maybe, true freedom is built on a foundation of absolute dependence.